The universe, Elena decided, had a truly twisted sense of humor. One minute, she was licking the wounds from a brutal internship rejection, lacked initiative, they'd said, the words still stinging like nettles, and the abrupt, gut-wrenching implosion of her relationship. The next? She was boarding a plane for her first crucial business trip with Novatech Solutions, her brand-new, last-chance lifeline in the cutthroat tech world. Nerves shredded her insides. This project, this trip to Chicago, had to go perfectly. It just had to. Failure wasn't an option. She'd crawled back from rock bottom, and climbing down again wasn't on the agenda. She'd meticulously planned everything. Or so she thought. The boutique hotel, the Seraphim, had looked chic online, conveniently located near the client's headquarters. Efficient. Professional. Exactly the image she needed to project. Reality, however, was a crimson velvet nightmare. Elena stared, aghast, at the room the concierge had apologetically unlocked for her after a frantic search revealed her original booking had somehow vanished. This wasn't a room. It was an explosion in a Valentine's Day factory. Plush red carpet swallowed her sensible heels. Gilded cherubs smirked from the walls. And the bed, oh God, the bed. A monstrous circular contraption draped in satin that shimmered under the recessed, offensively pink lighting. Worse, a mirror adorned the ceiling directly above it. A mirror. Elena felt a hysterical giggle bubble up, quickly suppressed. This had to be a joke. A mistake. A cosmic prank aimed squarely at her already fragile psyche. There seems to be a misunderstanding, she'd stammered to the concierge, who offered only a helpless shrug and muttered something about overbooking and complimentary upgrades. Upgrade? This felt more like a downgrade into someone's particularly lurid fantasy. And then, the final, crushing blow. The coup de grace delivered by fate's cruel hand. A cool, low voice spoke from the doorway behind her, a voice that sent an electric jolt straight down her spine, freezing the blood in her veins. Problem, Ms. Vance? Elena squeezed her eyes shut for a fraction of a second, praying she was hallucinating. That the stress, the rejection, the breakup had finally tipped her over the edge. But no. She knew that voice. Knew the precise timbre, the underlying steel beneath the smooth surface. It haunted her dreams, echoed in the hollow spaces of her apartment. Slowly, mechanically, she turned. Leaning against the doorframe, exuding an aura of effortless command and glacial composure, stood Daniel Sterling, CEO of Novatech Solutions. Tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her entire student loan debt, with eyes the color of storm clouds that were currently surveying the unique decor with an unreadable expression. Daniel Sterling. Her new boss. Daniel Sterling. The man who, just 4 weeks ago, had looked her straight in the eye and agreed that yes, maybe breaking up was for the best. Leaving her heart a shattered mess on her cheap apartment floor. The universe wasn't just twisted. It was sadistic. Her face flamed, hotter than the ridiculous pink lights. Mortification warred with a fresh wave of grief and anger. Mr. Sterling. There's been a mistake with the booking, she managed, her voice a pathetic squeak. This isn't the room I reserved. At all. He pushed off the doorframe, stepping fully into the room. His presence seemed to shrink the already claustrophobic space. He didn't look at her, his gaze sweeping over the circular bed, the mirrored ceiling, lingering for a moment on a particularly questionable abstract sculpture in balding feathers. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Was that amusement? Disgust? Impossible to tell. His face was a mask of cool neutrality, honed by years of boardroom battles. Indeed, he said, the single word dry as desert sand. He finally turned his gaze on her, and Elena felt pinned, like a butterfly under glass. Explain. Explain? How could she possibly explain this? That the hotel booking site, in a moment of digital rebellion, had apparently decided she, Elena Vance, needed not a standard queen but the eternal embrace suite? That in her haste to secure something affordable and close, she'd clicked confirm without triple-checking the fine print that probably mentioned romantic ambience and adult themes? Well, the system, I think, she began, waving her hands vaguely, feeling like an idiot. Online booking error. Definitely. I booked a standard executive room. Close to the client, very practical, good reviews. She trailed off, hearing the desperation in her own voice. She tried to inject some professionalism back into her tone. The price was reasonable, of course, for the standard room. This is obviously not standard. Daniel Sterling folded his arms across his broad chest, one perfect eyebrow slightly arched. The picture of skeptical authority. That tiny movement sent a fresh wave of heat crawling up Elena's neck. He knew exactly how flustered she was. And worse, she suspected he might be enjoying it. Just a little. The ghost of their past hung heavy in the air, thick and suffocating as the room's rose-scented potpourri. This forced proximity was a unique kind of torture. An error, he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. He took a step towards her. Then another. Elena instinctively backed away, bumping into a small, velvet-covered ottoman. She nearly tripped, flailing for balance. His hand shot out, quick as lightning, steadying her arm. His fingers brushed her skin, sending another unwanted jolt through her system. Close. He was suddenly far too close. She could smell the faint, clean scent of his cologne, see the faint lines around his eyes she hadn't noticed from afar. Quite a significant error, wouldn't you say, Ms. Vance? He murmured, his storm-cloud eyes fixed on hers. That faint hint of amusement was back, dancing in their depths. Are you absolutely certain you didn't perhaps request the CEO seduction package? Elena gasped, snatching her arm back as if burned. No. Of course not. I would never. He held up a hand, cutting off her frantic denial. But the corner of his mouth quirked upwards, just for a second. A fleeting, almost imperceptible smirk that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Relax, Ms. Vance. I believe you. He paused, letting the silence stretch, amplifying the ridiculousness of their situation. However, he continued, his tone shifting back to pure business, cold and crisp, we have a problem. The hotel confirms they are fully booked. No other rooms are available. Anywhere remotely convenient, it seems. He gestured vaguely around the room, encompassing the velvet, the mirrors, the sheer horror of it all. So, it appears we'll be sharing the eternal embrace suite. Elena stared at him, speechless. Sharing this monstrosity. With him. Her boss. Her ex. The man whose presence alone made her forget how to breathe properly. Her mind went blank, then flooded with 1,000 panicked thoughts. Sleeping arrangements? The single, enormous, circular bed? The mirrored ceiling? Daniel seemed to read her mind. Or maybe her wide-eyed panic was just that obvious. Don't look so terrified. You take the G-bed, he said, the word sounding faintly absurd on his lips. I'll take the sofa. He nodded towards a surprisingly nondescript couch huddled in a corner, looking deeply ashamed to be associated with the rest of the decor. It wasn't much of a concession, not really. Not when the air still crackled with unresolved tension, with the ghosts of whispered promises and tearful goodbyes. Not when every nerve ending in her body seemed hyper-aware of his proximity. He turned away then, running a hand through his dark hair, a rare crack in his perfect facade. Before heading towards the bathroom. I suggest you try and get some rest, Ms. Vance. We have an early start with the client tomorrow. The bathroom door clicked shut, leaving Elena alone in the bizarre, pink-lit silence. Rest? How could she possibly rest? Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She sank onto the edge of the offensive circular bed, the satin cool beneath her trembling hands. This business trip, her chance for a professional second chance, had already devolved into an awkward, emotionally charged disaster. Sharing a room, this room, with Daniel Sterling, it was a complication she couldn't have imagined in her wildest nightmares. And as she sat there, surrounded by velvet and mirrored fantasies, Elena couldn't shake the terrifying premonition that this incredibly awkward situation was only the beginning. The tension of the hotel room was palpable, but how would this impossible dynamic play out back in the familiar, yet now treacherous, territory of the office? Back in the familiar, yet now treacherous, territory of the Novatech Solutions office, the awkwardness of the Chicago hotel room lingered like stale perfume. If the Eternal Embrace suite had been a pressure cooker of forced intimacy and mortification, the sleek, minimalist expanse of the 40th floor felt like a different kind of torture chamber, one built of glass walls, hushed professionalism, and the constant, unnerving presence of Daniel Sterling. Elena Vance kept her head down, focusing fiercely on the monitor glow, pretending the last 48 hours hadn't happened. Pretending her new CEO wasn't the same man whose shadow still stretched long across her memory. Easier said than done. Her cubicle, nestled in the open-plan sea of the marketing department, offered zero privacy and a direct line of sight to the imposing glass box that was Daniel's office. He was in there now, a silhouette against the city skyline, commanding, remote. Untouchable. Except he wasn't, was he? She'd nearly fallen into his arms over a velvet ottoman. She'd slept, or rather, not slept, just feet away from him. The memory sent a fresh wave of heat creeping up her neck, and she forcefully redirected her attention to the quarterly report draft glowing on her screen. Professionalism. That was her shield, her armor. It had to be. The first challenge arrived via instant message, sharp and impersonal. From D. Sterling. Subject, Q3 Projections Analysis. Need revised draft incorporating Chicago client feedback by end of day. Comprehensive. EOD? Comprehensive? The Chicago feedback hadn't even been fully collated yet, and he wanted a complete overhaul based on fragments discussed less than a day ago? Elena's fingers tightened on her mouse. This felt less like a request and more like a test. Or perhaps, punishment? For the hotel debacle? For existing? Impossible to know. With Daniel, ambiguity was the name of the game. Always had been. She took a breath, squared her shoulders, and typed back a concise, professional acknowledgement. Challenge accepted. Rough morning, or is the sterling charm already wearing thin? A cheerful voice cut through her concentration. Elena looked up to see Sophia Bellwether leaning against her cubicle wall, a steaming mug in hand and a knowing glint in her eye. Sophia, her rock, her reality check, the only person at Novatech who knew some of the messy history. Not all of it, Elena hadn't quite managed to confess that her devastating ex was now signing her paychecks, but enough. Morning, Elena managed a weak smile. Just diving into the deep end. Apparently, EOD now means figure it out magically. Sophia peered over Elena's shoulder at the message. Ah, the classic Sterling special. Vague demands, impossible deadlines. Builds character. Or crushes souls. Jury's still out. She took a sip of her coffee. Seriously though, how was Chicago? Apart from the client stuff. You seemed tense when we texted. Elena thought back to the mirrored ceiling, the velvet, Daniel's unnervingly calm gaze. Tense didn't begin to cover it. Chicago was eventful, she said carefully, choosing understatement as her weapon. Hotel had a booking issue. Ended up being slightly less than ideal. Defined less than ideal, Sophia pressed, her eyes sharp. Let's just say the decor involved more red velvet than strictly necessary for a business trip, Elena deflected, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to her own ears. She couldn't bring herself to mention the shared room. Or who she'd shared it with. Some burdens were too heavy, even for Sophia's supportive shoulders. Sophia seemed to sense the evasion but didn't push. Blasts her. Right. Well, just survive the Sterling vortex today. Coffee later? My treat. You look like you need caffeine and commiseration. In that order. Deal, Elena agreed gratefully. Sophia gave her a quick shoulder squeeze and sauntered off towards the marketing bullpen, leaving Elena alone again with the looming deadline and the even more looming presence of Daniel Sterling. The day crawled by in a blur of spreadsheets, frantic emails, and calculated avoidance maneuvers. Elena mapped out routes to the coffee machine and restroom that bypassed Daniel's office entirely. She kept her contributions in team video calls concise and strictly professional, her gaze fixed firmly on the camera, refusing to let it stray towards the small window displaying Daniel's impassive face. His behavior remained a maddening puzzle. During a brief project check-in, he dissected her initial analysis with surgical precision, his critique sharp, impersonal, and infuriatingly accurate. Yet later, as she struggled with a complex data integration problem that had stumped even IT, a single, unmarked email appeared in her inbox. Subject, blank. Body, a link to an obscure technical forum thread detailing the exact solution she needed. No explanation. No sender signature beyond the standard Novatech footer. Coincidence? Or Daniel playing his inscrutable games? It was impossible to tell, and the not knowing gnawed at her. Was he trying to help her succeed, or just watching her squirm? The duality was dizzying, keeping her constantly off balance. This boss-employee relationship was a tightrope walk over a canyon of shared history. That evening, drained and defeated despite managing to submit the revised report mere minutes before the deadline, Elena found herself slumped on her couch, scrolling through Corp Life Confidential, an anonymous online forum Sophia had recommended for venting about workplace woes. Usually, she just lurked, finding grim solidarity in the tales of tyrannical bosses and passive-aggressive colleagues. Tonight, though, the pressure felt unbearable. The need to articulate the sheer absurdity of her situation, even to strangers, was overwhelming. She typed out a carefully anonymized post, new job, high stakes. Bosses, complicated. Brilliant, demanding, impossible to read. And there's history. Bad history. How do you stay professional when every interaction feels like walking through a minefield blindfolded? Feels like he's testing me, but maybe I'm just paranoid? Need to succeed but feel like I'm drowning. Any advice for dealing with a complicated boss situation? She hit post before she could second-guess herself, tossing her phone aside. Probably pointless. Just screaming into the digital void. A notification pinged minutes later. Surprised, she picked up the phone. A single reply to her post, from a user named strategist7. No profile picture, default avatar, account created that same week. The message was short, almost cryptic. Strategist 7, observation precedes action. Understand the power dynamics before you try to shift them. What does he react to? What does he ignore? Data is your ally. Elena stared at the message. It was, oddly specific. Not the usual generic hang-in-there platitudes. Data is your ally? Power dynamics? It sounded less like forum advice and more like something else. Something calculated. She felt a prickle of unease, but also, undeniably, intrigue. Who was this Strategist 7? Over the next few days, Strategist 7 became a recurring, anonymous presence in her digital life. They never initiated contact, only replying to her infrequent, vague posts on the forum, sometimes via direct message after she cautiously enabled them. Their advice remained cryptic but startlingly insightful. Elena's post, stuck on a project roadblock. Boss offered zero guidance. Strategist 7, don't ask for guidance. Present solutions. Even flawed ones show initiative. Force a reaction. Elena's post, feel like I'm being constantly watched/judged. Strategist 7, good. Use the scrutiny. Exceed expectations when he thinks you're about to stumble. Predictability is weakness. Elena's post, sometimes. I think he almost smiles? Then it's gone. It's messing with my head. Strategist 7, micro-expressions or data points. Is the smile genuine amusement? Contempt? Strategic misdirection? Observe. Analyze. Don't react emotionally. It was unsettling. The advice felt tailored, almost intimate in its understanding of her unspoken struggles with Daniel. But it was also compelling. Elena, desperate for any edge, decided to try an experiment. Strategist 7 had advised anticipating needs. Daniel had a crucial investor presentation coming up. Officially, Elena wasn't involved, but she knew the pressure he was under. Working late, fueled by lukewarm coffee and sheer nerve, she compiled a dossier of potential counterarguments the investors might raise, along with concise, data-backed rebuttals. She saved it as a PDF, titled simply Investor Prep Supplemental, and emailed it to Daniel's executive assistant with a note, "Thought this might be useful background for Mr. Sterling's presentation." No mention of her own initiative. Playing it cool. Professional. The next morning, Daniel walked past her desk without a word, same cool mask firmly in place. Elena's stomach sank. Waste of time. Overstepped. Then, just as he reached his office door, he paused. He didn't turn around, just spoke, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "Vance. The supplemental file. Adequate." Adequate? From Daniel Sterling, that was practically a standing ovation. A tiny thrill shot through her, quickly followed by confusion. Had he? How did he even know it was her? And why the minimal, almost grudging acknowledgement? It fit Strategist 7's prediction, force a reaction. She had. But the reaction itself only deepened the mystery surrounding her boss. The minor office conflict arrived in the form of Mark Jenkins from the sales team. Smarmy, ambitious Mark, who had a knack for showing up just as someone else's hard work was nearing completion. He'd been sniffing around the Chicago client follow-up, a project Daniel had explicitly assigned to Elena after the trip. Now, during a cross-departmental meeting, Mark presented a slide deck outlining his proposed next steps for the client, featuring several key insights lifted directly from Elena's EOD report from the previous week. Elena felt her blood run cold, then hot with indignation. She opened her mouth to object, but caught Daniel's eye across the conference table. His expression was unreadable, but there was a stillness about him, an attentiveness that made her pause. Strategist 7's latest advice echoed in her mind: conflict is an opportunity. Don't just react, reframe. Control the narrative. Instead of accusing Mark directly, Elena waited for him to finish, a polite, professional smile fixed on her face. Then, she spoke calmly. "Thank you, Mark, that's an interesting summary. It clearly builds upon the revised projections analysis and client feedback integration I submitted to Mr. Sterling last week. I particularly agree with your emphasis on point 3, the one correlating market penetration with the revised algorithm performance I detail on page 12 of that report. Perhaps," she added, turning her gaze towards Daniel, cool and direct, "we could pull up that specific section now to ensure everyone has the full context for Mark's excellent suggestions?" Silence. Mark flushed slightly. All eyes turned to Daniel. He held Elena's gaze for a long moment, a flicker of something, respect? Surprise? In his eyes before it was gone. "A sound suggestion, Ms. Vance," he said smoothly. "My assistant has the report. Let's ensure we're all aligned on the foundational data before proceeding." He effectively sidelined Mark while validating Elena, all without overt confrontation. It was masterful. And terrifyingly effective. Later, back at her desk, Elena felt a strange mix of triumph and unease. She'd handled it. She'd used the situation, just like Strategist 7 suggested. But Daniel's seamless intervention, his cool control, it felt orchestrated. Almost too perfect. Her phone pinged. Another DM from Strategist 7. Strategist 7, well played. You learn quickly. But office politics are merely skirmishes. The real battle lies elsewhere. Are you prepared? Prepared for what? The message felt ominous, a distinct shift from the previous tactical advice. A chill traced its way down her spine. Who was this person, this anonymous puppeteer pulling strings from the shadows? Their insights were invaluable, their guidance effective. Yet, the mystery surrounding Strategist 7 was growing deeper, more unsettling. And inextricably tangled with the enigma that was Daniel Sterling himself. The small victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the feeling that she was caught in a game far more complex, and potentially dangerous, than she understood. A game where the stakes felt increasingly personal, blurring the lines between professional ambition and the treacherous landscape of her own heart. The small victory over Mark Jenkins should have felt good, a tiny foothold gained in the treacherous climb up Novatech's corporate ladder. But Strategist 7's cryptic warning, the real battle lies elsewhere. Are you prepared? Had left a residue of unease, a faint metallic taste of anxiety at the back of Elena's throat. Prepared for what? The anonymous advisor offered no further clues, melting back into the digital shadows, leaving Elena feeling strangely exposed despite her minor triumph. She tried to shake it off, focusing on the demanding rhythm of work under Daniel Sterling's exacting gaze. Predictability is weakness, Strategist 7 had said. Elena was trying desperately to be anything but predictable, even as her heart hammered an unsteady rhythm against her ribs every time Daniel's shadow fell across her desk. And then, just as a fragile sense of routine began to settle, the real battle, or perhaps just the opening skirmish, arrived. She arrived in a whirlwind of expensive perfume, pastel cashmere, and wide-eyed, calculated innocence. Chloe Dubois. Recent graduate, newly minted intern, and, according to the introductory email circulated by HR, assigned to provide support on strategic projects within the CEO's office. Which apparently translated to orbiting Daniel Sterling like a particularly fluffy, determined satellite. Elena recognized her instantly, though years had passed since college. Chloe. The girl who'd perfected the art of the saccharine smile while simultaneously sharpening her claws. The girl who'd fluttered around Daniel even back then, when he and Elena were, well, when they were them. There was history there, tangled and unpleasant, involving a misunderstanding, a misdirected message Elena suspected deliberate sabotage, though she could never prove it, that had added another layer of pain to her already complicated relationship with Daniel back then. Seeing Chloe now, beaming up at Daniel Sterling in the hallway outside his office on her first day, felt like a particularly cruel twist of the knife. Mr. Sterling. It's such an honor. I've followed Novatech and your career, of course, for years. I'm just so thrilled to have this opportunity to learn from you, Chloe gushed, her voice a pitch higher than Elena remembered, dripping with admiration. Daniel, caught slightly off guard on his way into a meeting, offered a curt, professional nod. Welcome aboard, Ms. Dubois. My assistant has your onboarding schedule. His gaze flickered past Chloe, meeting Elena's for a brief, unreadable second before he swept past them both into the conference room. Cold. Efficient. Yet Elena couldn't shake the feeling that he'd seen her reaction, the slight tightening of her lips, the involuntary clench of her fist. Chloe turned to Elena then, her smile still firmly in place, but her eyes doing a quick, assessing sweep. Elena. Fancy seeing you here. We were in Professor Albright's seminar together, remember? Ages ago. Chloe, Elena acknowledged, keeping her own voice level, professional. Her shield. Welcome to Novatech. Thanks. It's just wild we both ended up here. Especially with you working so closely with Mr. Sterling now, Chloe said, tilting her head. The implication hung in the air, heavy and unwelcome. I guess things worked out for you after all. Before Elena could formulate a reply that wasn't dripping with sarcasm, Chloe linked her arm through Elena's companionably, though her grip felt surprisingly tight. You'll have to give me all the inside scoop. Especially on Mr. Sterling. What's he really like to work for? Like walking on eggshells over a dormant volcano, Elena thought grimly, forcing another polite smile. This was going to be a long internship. Chloe quickly made herself indispensable. Or rather, she made herself visible. She discovered Daniel's preferred coffee order, a specific single origin pour-over, black, information Elena herself had known intimately but kept filed away, and made sure a fresh cup appeared on his desk precisely at 8:05 a.m. every morning. She'd hover near his office door, armed with seemingly innocent questions that required lengthy, detailed explanations. She laughed, bright and tinkling, at his driest jokes during team meetings, her admiring gaze fixed solely on him. Elena watched this performance with a growing knot of resentment tightening in her stomach. It was jealousy, ugly and unwelcome, but sharp nonetheless. It wasn't just about Daniel, she told herself fiercely. It was about the history, the feeling of being undermined, the sheer injustice of Chloe waltzing in and staking a claim. Yet, beneath the righteous anger, a deeper, more vulnerable insecurity gnawed at her. Did Daniel like the attention? Was he flattered by Chloe's blatant admiration, a stark contrast to Elena's own carefully maintained professional distance? She confided in Sophia over lukewarm cappuccinos in the crowded downstairs cafe. She's laying it on so thick, sophomore. It's embarrassing. And he just lets her. Sophia stirred her drink thoughtfully. Okay, first, breathe. Second, Chloe Dubois has always been a piece of work wrapped in pink bows. Remember how she accidentally submitted her paper with half your research points in it back in Albright's class? Elena winced. She remembered. The professor hadn't believed her claims of plagiarism then, either. Chloe had cried prettily and gotten an A. Elena had barely scraped a B-. The memory still stung. I know. But it's different now. She's aiming for Daniel. And he's the boss. And your ex, Sophia added quietly, her gaze sympathetic. Which makes this approximately 1,000,000 times worse. So, what's his reaction? Is he buying the damsel in distress act? That was the million-dollar question. I don't know. Elena confessed, frustration lacing her voice. Sometimes I think he looks annoyed when she interrupts him with some idiotic question. But then he answers her so patiently. He even assigned her to help research the demographic data for the Miller account, which is my main focus right now. Ouch. Territory marking, Sophia grimaced. Classic office politics power play. Or, maybe he genuinely thinks she can handle it? She can't, Elena stated flatly. She barely knows how to use the analytics software. Okay, so maybe he's setting her up to fail? Or maybe, Sophia leaned forward conspiratorially, he's trying to make you jealous. Elena scoffed, though the thought sent an unwanted flutter through her. Right. Because the billionaire CEO has nothing better to do than play high school games with his ex-girlfriend employee. It sounded ridiculous. Didn't it? That night, Elena found herself back on Corp Life Confidential, typing out her frustrations. Update, complicated boss situation now includes sycophantic intern apparently gunning for his attention, and maybe my projects. Making it very hard to focus/maintain professional distance. Any tips for dealing with a workplace rival who plays dirty but looks like butter wouldn't melt? The reply from Strategist 7 was almost instantaneous, and sharper than before. Strategist 7, weakness invites attack. For saccharine act as a weapon, your professional distance is perceived as indifference or fear. Stop reacting, start acting. Why defend your territory when you can conquer his attention? He's the objective, she's merely an obstacle. Eliminate the obstacle or render it irrelevant. Be bolder. Make him notice you, not her. Bolder? Elena's fingers hovered over her keyboard. What did that even mean? The advice felt reckless, dangerous. Yet, the thought of Chloe smirking triumphantly while Elena faded into the background ignited a spark of defiance. Maybe Strategist 7 was right. Maybe playing it safe wasn't working. The next morning, Elena saw her chance. Daniel was standing by the large windows in the main conference room before a board meeting, frowning at his reflection, struggling with the intricate knot of his silver tie. It was slightly askew, a tiny imperfection that somehow made him look more human, more approachable. Chloe was nowhere in sight. Create moments he can't ignore, Strategist 7 had urged. Taking a deep breath, Elena walked over. Problem, Mr. Sterling? She asked, keeping her voice light, steady. He glanced at her, startled. It's stuck. He tugged at the silk again, his frown deepening. Allow me, Elena said, stepping closer before she could lose her nerve. Her heart was doing a frantic drum solo against her ribs. Close enough now to see the slight stubble shadowing his jaw, the way his dark lashes rested against his cheekbones when he looked down at her hands. She reached up, her fingers brushing against the crisp collar of his shirt, then the warm skin of his neck as she deftly loosened the knot and began readying it with practiced ease. She'd tied this knot for him countless times before, in another lifetime. The muscle memory was instantaneous, intimate. The air crackled with unspoken memories. She could feel his gaze intense on her face, could almost hear the sharp intake of his breath. She focused intently on the loops of silk, her own breathing shallow. When she finished, smoothing the knot perfectly against his shirt, she risked a quick glance up. His eyes were dark, turbulent, his usual mask momentarily gone. And yes, the very tips of his ears were distinctly flushed. "There," she said softly, stepping back, putting professional distance between them once more. "All set for the board." He cleared his throat, adjusting the knot, his composure snapping back into place like a rubber band. "Thank you, Ms. Vance." Efficient as always. His voice was perfectly even, but the lingering heat in his eyes told a different story. Elena gave a small nod and retreated, her legs feeling slightly shaky. Strategist 7 was right. He'd noticed. But if Elena thought that small victory would deter Chloe, she was mistaken. The rivalry escalated. Files Elena needed for the Miller account presentation mysteriously vanished from the shared drive, only to reappear hours later after frantic searching, accompanied by a wide-eyed apology from Chloe about maybe clicking the wrong thing. Then there were the whispers Elena sometimes caught near the coffee machine, snippets about her being stressed or struggling to keep up, whispers that always seemed to originate near Chloe's desk. The breaking point came during a team lunch in the crowded company cafeteria. Elena found herself cornered by Chloe near the salad bar. "Elena," Chloe began, her voice syrupy sweet, "I was just thinking, it must be sort of weird for you, working for Daniel now. I mean, you two were quite the item back in college, weren't you? Everyone thought you were endgame." She paused, spearing a cherry tomato with deliberate care. Such a shame it all fell apart so spectacularly. He seemed pretty broken up about it for a while there. Every word was a carefully aimed dart. Elena felt the blood drain from her face, then rush back in anger. The public setting, the casual cruelty disguised as concern, it was classic Chloe. Elena drew herself up, clutching her salad tongs like a weapon. Professionalism. Her shield. "College was a long time ago, Chloe," Elena said, her voice dangerously quiet but perfectly level. "Right now, my focus is on my work here at Novatech. Particularly the Miller account, which I believe Mr. Sterling entrusted to me. Perhaps you should focus on your own assigned tasks as well?" Chloe's smile tightened fractionally, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes before it was smoothed over. "Oh, absolutely. Just making conversation. We're all colleagues here, right?" She gave a little laugh and drifted away, leaving Elena trembling with suppressed fury. That afternoon, a sleek black folder landed on Elena's desk with a soft thud. She looked up to see Daniel walking away, already halfway back to his office. Inside the folder was a printout of the missing Miller account competitive analysis she'd spent all morning searching for, along with a handwritten sticky note attached, "Found this misfiled. Ensure secure backup protocols are followed going forward. DS." Elena stared at the note, then at Daniel's retreating back. Misfiled? Or rescued? Was this another test? A warning? Or, was it possible, was he actually protecting her from Chloe's sabotage? The ambiguity was infuriating, exhausting. Yet, beneath the frustration, a treacherous spark of something else ignited. Hope? Her phone buzzed. Strategist 7. Strategist 7, obstacle identified and engaged. Good. Now, pivot. The rival is a distraction. The objective remains the same. Time to increase the pressure. He's noticing. Don't let him look away. Increase the pressure? Elena's mind raced. This anonymous advisor was pushing her into deeper, more dangerous waters. She was playing with fire, caught between a manipulative rival, a mysterious online Svengali, and an enigmatic ex-boyfriend boss who held her entire future in his hands. The game was escalating, the stakes rising with every cryptic message, every charged glance, every beat of her conflicted heart. And she had no idea where it was leading, only that turning back no longer seemed like an option. The question wasn't just what Strategist 7 wanted her to do next, but whose game was she truly playing? The game, as Strategist 7 had called it, was undeniably escalating. Elena felt herself swept along by its current, emboldened by the anonymous advisor's uncanny insights yet increasingly unnerved by their precision. It was like having a ghost whisper battle plans in her ear, effective, yes, but deeply unsettling. Who was this person who understood the intricate dynamics of Novatech, the subtle nuances of Daniel Sterling's personality, and, most disturbingly, the hidden vulnerabilities of Elena's own heart? The reliance felt like a double-edged sword. Each successful maneuver suggested by Strategist 7 also sharpened the sliver of suspicion taking root in her mind. How could a stranger know so much? The coincidences started subtly, easy to dismiss at first. Strategist 7, via their usual cryptic DM on the Corp Life Confidential forum, suggested a novel approach to presenting market saturation data for the Miller account, advising her to use a specific predictive modeling technique Daniel had apparently mentioned favoring in a long-forgotten industry interview. Frame it not as limitation, but as untapped potential via disruptive innovation. Use his own past logic against him. Days later, during a tense review meeting, Daniel himself used the phrase disruptive innovation potential while discussing expansion strategies, his gaze sweeping coolly over the team, pausing just a fraction of a second too long on Elena. Her breath caught. Just jargon, she told herself. Corporate buzzwords. It meant nothing. But then it happened again. Elena posted a vague lament about hitting a wall with integrating a new CRM software module. Strategist 7, the bottleneck isn't the software, it's the legacy data migration protocol. There's a workaround patch developed by a German startup. Niche, but effective. Look into DataWeave Solutions. The next morning, an internal memo from IT announced the expedited rollout of a new data migration tool, specifically citing compatibility issues with the CRM module Elena was wrestling with. The memo was CC'd to Daniel. Elena felt a cold dread mix with grudging admiration. Strategist 7 didn't just offer advice, they seemed to anticipate, even influence, events within Novatech. The advisor's knowledge felt less like strategic insight and more like inside information. She started paying closer attention, analyzing Strategist 7's messages with the same intensity she applied to market reports. The writing style was concise, almost clinical, favoring short, declarative sentences. There was a peculiar aversion to using contractions, a formality that felt slightly stiff, almost archaic in the context of an anonymous online forum. She compared it to Daniel's emails, equally formal, equally precise, also notably lacking in contractions. Dismissing it as coincidence felt increasingly like willful blindness. But the alternative? That Daniel Sterling, the aloof CEO, her ex-boyfriend, was spending his evenings moonlighting as an anonymous online agony aunt for her? It was ludicrous. Utterly impossible. Wasn't it? The suspicion festered, a low-grade fever in the back of her mind. She needed something more concrete, some piece of evidence that wasn't just circumstantial. The opportunity arrived unexpectedly, wrapped in a request that was pure Daniel, coolly delivered, slightly inconvenient, and utterly non-negotiable. He'd summoned her to his office late one Thursday afternoon. "Ms. Vance," he began, not looking up from the document he was reviewing, "I require your assistance. There's an unavoidable industry gala this evening. Black tie. Utterly tedious." He finally glanced up, his expression conveying profound boredom. "Unfortunately, my usual dog sitter cancelled last minute. I need someone reliable to stay at my apartment this evening. Feed the dog, ensure he doesn't destroy the furniture." He paused. "You live relatively close by. And you seem responsible." Elena blinked. Dog sitting? For the CEO? It was bizarre. And yet. "You have a dog?" she asked, surprised. In all the time they'd dated, he'd never mentioned a pet. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. "A recent acquisition. Samoyed puppy. High energy." He pushed a keycard and a ridiculously heavy-looking key fob across the polished desk. Address is programmed into the fob. Standard alarm code as the company's founding year. Feed him at 7. Short walk before bed. Water available at all times. Any questions? It was less a request, more a directive. Part of her wanted to refuse, to protest the unprofessionalism. But another, more curious part, the part increasingly obsessed with the enigma of Daniel Sterling, saw an opportunity. A glimpse behind the corporate mask. No questions, Mr. Sterling. I can manage. Excellent. He gave a curt nod, already turning back to his document, dismissing her. Daniel's apartment was exactly what she'd expected, sleek, minimalist, bordering on sterile, with breathtaking city views and furniture that probably cost more than her annual salary. The only sign of life, besides a few strategically placed abstract sculptures, was the dog. An adorable, fluffy white cloud of pure chaos who greeted her with ecstatic yips and a furiously wagging tail. Hey there, buddy, Elena crouched down, ruffling the thick fur. Daniel had called him buddy, hadn't he? The dog licked her face enthusiastically, then proceeded to zoom around the apartment like a furry white comet. Adorable, yes. But buddy? It seemed oddly generic for someone like Daniel. After feeding the creature, who inhaled the expensive-looking kibble in seconds, and a brief, windswept walk along the riverfront, Elena found herself with hours to kill in Daniel Sterling's silent, imposing apartment. She tried to work on her Miller account presentation, but her gaze kept drifting, scanning the bookshelves, mostly business strategy and biographies, but also a surprising amount of classic literature, the artwork, cool, detached abstracts, the overall lack of personal clutter. It was the apartment of a man who kept his inner life locked down tight. Then, while tidying a stray pile of magazines on the bespoke concrete coffee table, she saw it. Tucked beneath a copy of the Financial Times was a slim, leather-bound journal. Not a diary, exactly, more like a planner, but definitely personal. Her heart gave a guilty thump. Snooping was wrong. Definitely wrong. But the suspicion about Strategist 7, the need for some kind of proof, gnawed at her. Just a quick peek? Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Mostly needing notes, dates, terse reminders. Nothing incriminating. But then, tucked into a back pocket, was a small, folded piece of paper. A receipt? No. It was a registration certificate. From the breeder. For one Samoyed puppy. Name, Marshmallow. Marshmallow. Elena sank onto the ridiculously expensive sofa, the certificate fluttering from her numb fingers. Marshmallow. Not Buddy. He'd lied about the dog's name. Why? It was such a small, insignificant detail. Unless it wasn't insignificant at all. Marshmallow. Soft, sweet, maybe even a little sentimental? It was completely out of character for the cold, calculating Daniel Sterling she knew. Or thought she knew. Why hide it? Why the generic buddy for her benefit? It felt like another layer of deliberate obfuscation, another piece of the puzzle that refused to fit. She picked up the certificate again, tracing the ridiculously fluffy name. Marshmallow. A secret softness hidden beneath the steel. It made the Strategist 7 theory scene, suddenly, terrifyingly less impossible. She was still wrestling with the implications when Daniel returned, well after midnight. He looked tired, loosening the perfect bow tie as he entered, his usual armor slightly dented by the demands of the gala. He tossed his keys onto the counter with a clatter. Everything all right here? He asked, his voice rough with fatigue. Marshmallow, sensing his arrival, trotted over, tail wagging. Daniel reached down, scratching the dog behind the ears with surprising tenderness. Hey, pup, he murmured. Pup. Not Buddy. Not Marshmallow. Another layer. Elena's head spun. Everything's fine, she managed, standing up, clutching her bag. He was very well behaved. Daniel grunted, heading towards the kitchen alcove. Water, he offered, already reaching for a bottle. No, thank you. I should get going. She needed to escape, to process. He'd slumped onto the sofa, laptop already open on the coffee table, shedding his jacket. He looked utterly exhausted, but still driven, still scrolling through emails. Elena hesitated by the door, watching him. The open laptop, the fatigue lowering his guard. She took a step closer, ostensibly to retrieve her forgotten scarf from the armrest. As she leaned over, her gaze flickered, almost involuntarily, towards the laptop screen. Just for a second. But it was enough. Open in one of the browser tabs, stark against the dark theme, was the familiar interface of the Corp Life Confidential forum. And logged in, the default gray avatar mocking her, was the username, strategist7. Time seemed to stop. The air left Elena's lungs in a silent rush. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't paranoia. It was him. All along. Daniel Sterling, her brilliant, infuriating, ice-cold boss, her devastating ex-boyfriend, was her anonymous online mentor. Her secret advisor. Her manipulator. A wave of dizziness washed over her. Shock, cold and sharp, pierced through her exhaustion. Followed immediately by a surge of white-hot anger. He had played her. Used her vulnerability, her ambition, her lingering feelings against her. He'd watched her struggles, her confusion, her tentative steps, all while pulling the strings from behind his screen. The intimacy she'd felt with Strategist 7, the sense of being understood, now felt grotesque, a violation. The advice, the encouragement, all part of an elaborate, calculated game. Betrayal coiled in her stomach, bitter and acidic. How could he? After everything? After the way things ended? Was this some kind of twisted revenge? Or just another power play, asserting his control over every aspect of her life, professional and personal? But then, beneath the anger, beneath the stinging humiliation, another thought surfaced, unwelcome but insistent. Why? Why go to such elaborate lengths? Why spend hours crafting cryptic advice, tracking her progress, orchestrating events? Why guide her, push her, even subtly protect her, the misfiled folder, the handling of Mark Jenkins? If he truly wanted her to fail, or simply didn't care, wouldn't benign neglect have been easier? This level of sustained effort, this intricate manipulation, it spoke of something more than casual cruelty. It spoke of obsession? Investment? Could it possibly be that this entire elaborate deception, this whole Strategist 7 persona, was Daniel's twisted, emotionally stunted way of staying connected? Of trying to win her back, or at least keep her in his orbit, because he didn't know any other way? The complexity of it crashed down on her. He'd lied. He'd manipulated. He'd played games with her heart and her career. And yet, he'd also helped her. He'd seen her potential when others, like her previous internship boss, hadn't. He'd pushed her to be stronger, bolder. He'd given her the tools to navigate the Novatech minefield. It was infuriating. Confusing. Devastating. Daniel looked up then, catching the turbulent emotion on her face. He frowned slightly, his own exhaustion momentarily forgotten. Vance? Are you all right? You look pale. Elena stared at him, the architect of her recent triumphs and turmoil, the keeper of secrets, including, apparently, his dog's real name. The power dynamic between them had just done a violent, seismic shift. He thought he held all the cards. He had no idea she'd just seen his entire hand. The anger warred with a confusing swirl of hurt and something else. Something dangerously close to a thrill. She held his secret now. The question was, standing there in the pre-dawn glow of his apartment, reeling from the revelation, what on earth was she going to do with it? The game had just taken a turn no one, least of all Daniel Sterling, could have possibly anticipated. The knowledge burned, Daniel Sterling was Strategist 7. The revelation hadn't brought clarity, only a more complex, more dangerous kind of confusion. It was like knowing the hidden mechanics of a trap you were already caught in. Elena spent the next few days walking through the sleek corridors of Novatech Solutions in a state of heightened awareness, every interaction with Daniel now filtered through this new, fractured lens. His cool efficiency, his demanding standards, even his rare, fleeting moments of perceived helpfulness, were they genuine? Or just more moves in the intricate game orchestrated by Strategist 7? She watched him in meetings, analyzed his emails for the ghost of her advisor's syntax, the telltale lack of contractions, the precise, almost clinical phrasing. The anger still simmered, a low, constant heat beneath the surface of her carefully maintained professionalism, but it was now complicated by a reluctant, grudging understanding. He was a manipulator, yes. Deceptive. Utterly infuriating. But the sheer effort involved, it spoke volumes he probably never intended. He saw her. He was invested. For reasons she couldn't yet fathom, Daniel Sterling, the man who'd shattered her heart, couldn't seem to let her go. The power had undeniably shifted, but holding his secret felt less like holding a weapon and more like juggling live grenades. One wrong move, one careless word, and everything could explode. Just as she was contemplating how, or even if, to make her next move in this bewildering game, the board was violently upended. It started, as most modern disasters do, online. A ping from Sophia first alerted her. Elena. Check this now. Attached was a link to a notoriously sleazy tech gossip blog, Silicon Spill. The headline screamed in lurid digital print, exclusive pics, Novatech CEO Daniel Sterling's business trip with junior staffer heats up in Cheetown love nest. Elena's blood ran cold. She clicked the link, her hand trembling. There they were. Grainy, obviously taken with a long lens or hidden camera, but unmistakable. A series of photos showing her and Daniel entering the Seraphim Hotel in Chicago. Worse, one particularly damning shot captured them standing directly outside the door labeled Eternal Embrace Suite, the ridiculous name now seeming less like a joke and more like a curse. Another photo, timestamped later that night, showed Daniel alone on the balcony, smoking, a rare sight Elena herself had witnessed from inside his apartment. The article beneath was pure salacious speculation, painting Elena as a calculating climber using her feminine wiles, and Daniel as a powerful executive exploiting his position. It hinted darkly at HR complaints and shareholder concerns. The comments section was already a cesspool of judgment and innuendo. The timing wasn't accidental. Elena knew it instantly. Daniel was due back from a short overseas trip to London the next day. And the final signing meeting with Miller Corporation, the culmination of weeks of her hard work, was scheduled for the day after his return. This wasn't random gossip, this was a targeted strike. A public relations crisis designed to inflict maximum damage at the most critical moment. The fallout in the office was immediate and brutal. The air thickened with whispers. People stopped talking when she approached the coffee machine. She felt eyes following her down the hallway, a mixture of pity, curiosity, and condemnation. Mark Jenkins looked particularly smug. Even Chloe Dubois, when their paths crossed near the elevators, offered a look of wide-eyed, insincere sympathy that made Elena's stomach churn. "Oh, Elena," Chloe murmured, her voice dripping with false concern. "I saw that awful blog post. People can be so cruel. I hope Mr. Sterling isn't too upset." The unspoken accusation, that this was somehow Elena's fault, hung heavy in the air. Sophia, predictably, was a whirlwind of righteous fury. She stormed over to Elena's desk, phone in hand, her face flushed with anger. "Okay, this has Chloe's perfectly manicured fingerprints all over it," she hissed, keeping her voice low but intense. "Or that slimeball Jenkins. Or both. Remember I told you my contact in finance heard whispers about S Group trying to poach the Miller deal? S Group. The same vultures who tried that hostile takeover last year? The ones Chloe miraculously landed an internship with after she resigned from here?" Elena nodded numbly, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. S Group, Novatech's bitter rival. Losing the Miller account would hurt Novatech significantly, especially after the financial instability caused by S Group's earlier withdrawal of investment, an instability Daniel had fought tooth and nail to overcome. And Chloe, dear, sweet Chloe, who knew Elena and Daniel's college history, who likely still harbored resentment over Daniel's disinterest and Elena's perceived role in it back then, had landed softly at the rival company. It was corporate espionage wrapped in personal revenge. Scuttling the Miller deal and publicly humiliating Daniel and tarnishing Elena's reputation? It was a brutally efficient 2-for-1 strike. The hammer blow fell an hour later. An email from Robert Miller himself, CEO of Miller Corporation, polite, professional, but chilling. Ms. Vance, regarding our scheduled signing, in light of recent media reports concerning Novatech leadership, perhaps it would be prudent to postpone, allow time for clarification, ensure alignment with Miller Corp's corporate governance standards, postpone indefinitely. That's what it meant. The deal, her deal, the one she'd poured heart and soul into, the one that was supposed to solidify her position at Novatech, was circling the drain. All because of a grainy photo and a malicious headline. The pressure felt crushing. She needed to talk to Daniel. Now. But the thought of calling him, knowing what she knew. Strategist 7. The irony was nauseating. He'd advised her on handling office politics, on projecting confidence, on controlling narratives. Well, the narrative was currently a runaway train heading straight for a cliff. Steeling herself, Elena retreated to an empty stairwell, the cold concrete strangely calming. She pulled out her phone, dialing Daniel's international number. It was the middle of the night in London. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. Sterling. Daniel, it's Elena. She kept her voice low, steady. Professional. Shield up. There was a pause. Elena? Is everything all right? It's 3 a.m. here. No, Daniel. Everything is very much not all right. She quickly, concisely outlined the situation, the blog post, the photos, the specific mention of the suite name, the email from Miller Corporation. She detailed Sophia's intel about S Group and Chloe's likely involvement. She laid it all out, cold, hard facts. She heard him exhale sharply on the other end of the line. Heard the rustle of sheets as he presumably sat up. S Group. Du Bois. Damn it. His voice was awake now, sharp with anger and calculation. Okay. I'll call Combs, legal. No, Elena cut him off, surprising herself with her own firmness. This was her moment. Her move. The power dynamic felt tangible, even across continents. Legal statements and denials won't kill this story, Daniel. Not fast enough. They'll just add fuel to the fire. We both know how this works. Mud sticks. Another pause. She could almost picture him frowning, running a hand through his sleep-rumpled hair. What are you suggesting, Elena? Here it was. She took a deep breath, the knowledge of Strategist 7 giving her an unexpected, almost reckless courage. Time to control the narrative. Time to play the game. His game. There's only one way to neutralize this effectively, Daniel. We don't deny. We don't deflect. We confirm. Confirm? Confusion laced his voice. Confirm what? That I shared a ridiculously themed hotel room with my employee due to a booking error? How does that help? No, Elena said, her voice dropping slightly, deliberately laced with implication. We confirm the subtext they're pushing. We confirm the why. Why would the CEO and a junior employee end up in the eternal embrace suite together? She let the question hang in the air for a beat. There's only one answer that kills the scandal and satisfies Miller Corp's delicate sensibilities about optics. Silence stretched across the line, thick with unspoken understanding. Elena held her breath, listening to the faint transatlantic static. She could almost feel him processing, calculating, seeing the audacious logic of her proposal. You're suggesting, he finally said, his voice incredibly soft, almost stunned, that we tell Miller, tell the world, that we are involved? Romantically? It's the boldest move, Elena replied, echoing a phrase Strategist 7 had used in one of their DMs. She felt a tremor run through her. Was she really doing this? Turns the narrative from illicit scandal to private romance exposed. Makes S Group look like malicious gossips, makes Chloe look like a scorned liar if she tries to contradict it. Saves the Miller deal. Protects the company. Protects you, she didn't add. She heard him take a slow, deep breath. Was he angry? Amused? She couldn't read him over the phone. But she held her ground, the secret knowledge bolstering her resolve. This strategy, he said, the word choice deliberate, sending a jolt through Elena. He knew she knew he'd recognize the phrasing. It puts you in a difficult position, Elena. Your reputation. My reputation is already being shredded online, she interrupted coolly. This cauterizes the wound. It's damage control. The most effective option on the board. She paused. Unless strategist 7 has a better idea? The silence this time was absolute, deafening. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Had she pushed too far? Revealed too much? Then, finally, he spoke. His voice was different now. Lower. Rougher. Stripped of its usual cool control, replaced with something raw, almost vulnerable? No, he said quietly. Strategist 7 wouldn't argue with the logic. Another pause. When he spoke again, there was a strange undercurrent Elena couldn't quite decipher. Astonishment, maybe? Resignation? Or something else entirely? If we are to present ourselves as lovers, then I would be. He hesitated, the word seeming to catch in his throat. Honored, Elena. Elena closed her eyes, leaning her head against the cool concrete wall. Honored. The word hung between them, heavy with implications she couldn't begin to untangle. He'd agreed. He'd followed her lead. The game had irrevocably changed. I'll draft a statement for Combs to adapt, she said, pulling her professional shield firmly back into place. Focusing on our long-standing personal connection predating Novatech, condemning the malicious invasion of privacy, and reaffirming our commitment to the Miller partnership. It should go out within the hour. Do it, Daniel said, his voice regaining some of its usual command, but the underlying roughness remained. I'll back your play completely. They disconnected, leaving Elena alone in the echoing stairwell, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She'd done it. Faced the crisis, leveraged her secret knowledge, and taken control. The public relations storm was managed, the Miller deal salvaged under the umbrella of their newly minted, committed personal relationship. The office gossip would now morph into fevered speculation about the CEO's secret love life. But as she walked back towards her desk, the weight of their shared lie settled upon her. They were trapped now, bound together by a public facade constructed from manipulation and necessity. How long could they maintain it? And what would happen when the lines between the performance and the tangled, unresolved reality between them began to blur? The immediate crisis was over, but the private reckoning, Elena suspected, was just beginning. The knowledge burned. Daniel Sterling was strategist 7. The revelation hadn't brought clarity, only a more complex, more dangerous kind of confusion. It was like knowing the hidden mechanics of a trap you were already caught in. Elena spent the next few days walking through the sleek corridors of Novatech Solutions in a state of heightened awareness, every interaction with Daniel now filtered through this new, fractured lens. His cool efficiency, his demanding standards, even his rare, fleeting moments of perceived helpfulness, were they genuine? Or just more moves in the intricate game orchestrated by Strategist 7? She watched him in meetings, analyzed his emails for the ghost of her advisor's syntax, the telltale lack of contractions, the precise, almost clinical phrasing. The anger still simmered, a low, constant heat beneath the surface of her carefully maintained professionalism, but it was now complicated by a reluctant, grudging understanding. He was a manipulator, yes. Deceptive. Utterly infuriating. But the sheer effort involved, it spoke volumes he probably never intended. He saw her. He was invested. For reasons she couldn't yet fathom, Daniel Sterling, the man who'd shattered her heart, couldn't seem to let her go. The power had undeniably shifted, but holding his secret felt less like holding a weapon and more like juggling live grenades. One wrong move, one careless word, and everything could explode. Just as she was contemplating how, or even if, to make her next move in this bewildering game, the board was violently upended. It started, as most modern disasters do, online. A ping from Sophia first alerted her. Elena. Check this now. Attached was a link to a notoriously sleazy tech gossip blog, Silicon Spill. The headline screamed in lurid digital print, exclusive pics, Novatech CEO Daniel Sterling's business trip with junior staffer heats up in Cheetown love nest. Elena's blood ran cold. She clicked the link, her hand trembling. There they were. Grainy, obviously taken with a long lens or hidden camera, but unmistakable. A series of photos showing her and Daniel entering the Seraphim Hotel in Chicago. Worse, one particularly damning shot captured them standing directly outside the door labeled Eternal Embrace Suite, the ridiculous name now seeming less like a joke and more like a curse. Another photo, timestamped later that night, showed Daniel alone on the balcony, smoking, a rare sight Elena herself had witnessed from inside his apartment. The article beneath was pure salacious speculation, painting Elena as a calculating climber using her feminine wiles, and Daniel as a powerful executive exploiting his position. It hinted darkly at HR complaints and shareholder concerns. The comments section was already a cesspool of judgment and innuendo. The timing wasn't accidental. Elena knew it instantly. Daniel was due back from a short overseas trip to London the next day. And the final signing meeting with Miller Corporation, the culmination of weeks of her hard work, was scheduled for the day after his return. This wasn't random gossip, this was a targeted strike. A public relations crisis designed to inflict maximum damage at the most critical moment. The fallout in the office was immediate and brutal. The air thickened with whispers. People stopped talking when she approached the coffee machine. She felt eyes following her down the hallway, a mixture of pity, curiosity, and condemnation. Mark Jenkins looked particularly smug. Even Chloe Dubois, when their paths crossed near the elevators, offered a look of wide-eyed, insincere sympathy that made Elena's stomach churn. "Oh, Elena," Chloe murmured, her voice dripping with false concern. "I saw that awful blog post. People can be so cruel. I hope Mr. Sterling isn't too upset." The unspoken accusation, that this was somehow Elena's fault, hung heavy in the air. Sophia, predictably, was a whirlwind of righteous fury. She stormed over to Elena's desk, phone in hand, her face flushed with anger. "Okay, this has Chloe's perfectly manicured fingerprints all over it," she hissed, keeping her voice low but intense. "Or that slimeball Jenkins. Or both. Remember I told you my contact in finance heard whispers about S Group trying to poach the Miller deal? S Group. The same vultures who tried that hostile takeover last year? The ones Chloe miraculously landed an internship with after she resigned from here?" Elena nodded numbly, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. S Group, Novatech's bitter rival. Losing the Miller account would hurt Novatech significantly, especially after the financial instability caused by S Group's earlier withdrawal of investment, an instability Daniel had fought tooth and nail to overcome. And Chloe, dear, sweet Chloe, who knew Elena and Daniel's college history, who likely still harbored resentment over Daniel's disinterest and Elena's perceived role in it back then, had landed softly at the rival company. It was corporate espionage wrapped in personal revenge. Scuttling the Miller deal and publicly humiliating Daniel and tarnishing Elena's reputation? It was a brutally efficient 2-for-1 strike. The hammer blow fell an hour later. An email from Robert Miller himself, CEO of Miller Corporation, polite, professional, but chilling. "Ms. Vance, regarding our scheduled signing, in light of recent media reports concerning Novatech leadership, perhaps it would be prudent to postpone, allow time for clarification, ensure alignment with Miller Corp's corporate governance standards, postpone indefinitely." That's what it meant. The deal, her deal, the one she'd poured heart and soul into, the one that was supposed to solidify her position at Novatech, was circling the drain. All because of a grainy photo and a malicious headline. The pressure felt crushing. She needed to talk to Daniel. Now. But the thought of calling him, knowing what she knew. Strategist 7. The irony was nauseating. He'd advised her on handling office politics, on projecting confidence, on controlling narratives. Well, the narrative was currently a runaway train heading straight for a cliff. Steeling herself, Elena retreated to an empty stairwell, the cold concrete strangely calming. She pulled out her phone, dialing Daniel's international number. It was the middle of the night in London. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. Sterling. Daniel, it's Elena. She kept her voice low, steady. Professional. Shield up. There was a pause. Elena? Is everything all right? It's 3 a.m. here. No, Daniel. Everything is very much not all right. She quickly, concisely outlined the situation, the blog post, the photos, the specific mention of the suite name, the email from Miller Corporation. She detailed Sophia's intel about S Group and Chloe's likely involvement. She laid it all out, cold, hard facts. She heard him exhale sharply on the other end of the line. Heard the rustle of sheets as he presumably sat up. S Group. Du Bois. Damn it. His voice was awake now, sharp with anger and calculation. Okay. I'll call Combs, legal. No, Elena cut him off, surprising herself with her own firmness. This was her moment. Her move. The power dynamic felt tangible, even across continents. Legal statements and denials won't kill this story, Daniel. Not fast enough. They'll just add fuel to the fire. We both know how this works. Mud sticks. Another pause. She could almost picture him frowning, running a hand through his sleep-rumpled hair. What are you suggesting, Elena? Here it was. She took a deep breath, the knowledge of Strategist 7 giving her an unexpected, almost reckless courage. Time to control the narrative. Time to play the game. His game. There's only one way to neutralize this effectively, Daniel. We don't deny. We don't deflect. We confirm. Confirm? Confusion laced his voice. Confirm what? That I shared a ridiculously themed hotel room with my employee due to a booking error? How does that help? No, Elena said, her voice dropping slightly, deliberately laced with implication. We confirm the subtext they're pushing. We confirm the why. Why would the CEO and a junior employee end up in the eternal embrace suite together? She let the question hang in the air for a beat. There's only one answer that kills the scandal and satisfies Miller Corp's delicate sensibilities about optics. Silence stretched across the line, thick with unspoken understanding. Elena held her breath, listening to the faint transatlantic static. She could almost feel him processing, calculating, seeing the audacious logic of her proposal. You're suggesting, he finally said, his voice incredibly soft, almost stunned, that we tell Miller, tell the world, that we are involved? Romantically? It's the boldest move, Elena replied, echoing a phrase Strategist 7 had used in one of their DMs. She felt a tremor run through her. Was she really doing this? Turns the narrative from illicit scandal to private romance exposed. Makes S Group look like malicious gossips, makes Chloe look like a scorned liar if she tries to contradict it. Saves the Miller deal. Protects the company. Protects you, she didn't add. She heard him take a slow, deep breath. Was he angry? Amused? She couldn't read him over the phone. But she held her ground, the secret knowledge bolstering her resolve. This strategy, he said, the word choice deliberate, sending a jolt through Elena. He knew she knew he'd recognize the phrasing. It puts you in a difficult position, Elena. Your reputation. My reputation is already being shredded online, she interrupted coolly. This cauterizes the wound. It's damage control. The most effective option on the board. She paused. Unless Strategist 7 has a better idea? The silence this time was absolute, deafening. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Had she pushed too far? Revealed too much? Then, finally, he spoke. His voice was different now. Lower. Rougher. Stripped of its usual cool control, replaced with something raw, almost vulnerable? No, he said quietly. Strategist 7 wouldn't argue with the logic. Another pause. When he spoke again, there was a strange undercurrent Elena couldn't quite decipher. Astonishment, maybe? Resignation? Or something else entirely? If we are to present ourselves as lovers, then I would be. He hesitated, the words seeming to catch in his throat. Honored, Elena. Elena closed her eyes, leaning her head against the cool concrete wall. Honored. The word hung between them, heavy with implications she couldn't begin to untangle. He'd agreed. He'd followed her lead. The game had irrevocably changed. I'll draft a statement for Combs to adapt, she said, pulling her professional shield firmly back into place. Focusing on our long-standing personal connection predating Novitek, condemning the malicious invasion of privacy, and reaffirming our commitment to the Miller partnership. It should go out within the hour. Do it, Daniel said, his voice regaining some of its usual command, but the underlying roughness remained. I'll back your play completely. They disconnected, leaving Elena alone in the echoing stairwell, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. She'd done it. Faced the crisis, leveraged her secret knowledge, and taken control. The public relations storm was managed, the Miller deal salvaged under the umbrella of their newly minted, committed personal relationship. The office gossip would now morph into fevered speculation about the CEO's secret love life. But as she walked back towards her desk, the weight of their shared lie settled upon her. They were trapped now, bound together by a public facade constructed from manipulation and necessity. How long could they maintain it? And what would happen when the lines between the performance and the tangled, unresolved reality between them began to blur? The immediate crisis was over, but the private reckoning, Elena suspected, was just beginning. The fragile truce forged in the crucible of truth and shared vulnerability held steady in the days that followed their confrontation. The awkwardness of their public relationship at Novitek began to soften around the edges, replaced by something tentative, hopeful, yet still undefined. Daniel's invitation to the city's annual Midsummer Lantern Festival, initially proposed with the careful caveat 4 appearances, hung between them, shimmering with unspoken possibility. He hadn't pushed, she hadn't declined. It existed as a question mark at the end of a week filled with surprisingly normal work interactions, punctuated by moments where their eyes would meet across a boardroom table or in the hallway, charged with the weight of everything revealed and everything still unsaid. As the evening of the festival arrived, warm and alive with the scent of blooming night jasmine and sizzling street food from vendors setting up along the riverbank, Elena found her usual defenses warring with a fluttering anticipation she couldn't quite suppress. She'd told Sophia she was going, bracing for teasing, but her friend had simply smiled knowingly. About time, Vance. Just try not to analyze every flicker of his eyelid, okay? Sometimes a lantern festival is just a lantern festival. Easy for Sophia to say. For Elena, nothing with Daniel Sterling felt simple anymore. He met her near the entrance to the park where the main festivities were held, looking devastatingly handsome in casual linen trousers and a dark blue shirt, sleeves rolled up his forearms. Gone was the impenetrable CEO armor. Tonight, he just looked like Daniel. The Daniel she remembered from stolen moments before everything imploded. The sight sent a pang through her chest, a confusing mix of remembered pain and burgeoning hope. Ready for the appearance? He asked, a faint, self-deprecating smile touching his lips. Elena nodded, matching his attempt at lightness. Ready to maintain the crucial corporate facade amongst crowds armed with sticky cotton candy and glowing novelty necklaces. They fell into step, navigating the growing throng. Colorful paper lanterns hung from tree branches and temporary arches, casting intricate patterns of light and shadow on the path. The air buzzed with laughter, music from distant stages, and the happy shouts of children chasing fireflies. It was a world away from the sterile intensity of Noviteka's offices, from the calculated manipulations of Strategist 7, from the public relations crisis they'd barely weathered. They wandered, caught up in the vibrant current of the festival. They bought skewers of grilled meat from a smoky stall, Daniel surprisingly adept at navigating the condiment station. They watched artisans weaving intricate baskets and children getting their faces painted with glittering designs. They didn't talk about work, or Strategist 7, or the complicated tangle of their lives. Instead, they talked about trivial things, the merits of different street food vendors, funny childhood memories sparked by the games of chance, the ridiculously oversized inflatable swan someone was trying to win at a ring toss booth. It was easy. Comfortable. Dangerously familiar. Elena found herself relaxing, truly relaxing, for the first time in weeks. The constant tension she carried in her shoulders began to ease. She laughed at one of Daniel's dry, unexpected quips, a genuine laugh that surprised them both. He looked at her then, his expression softening, the usual guard in his storm-cloud eyes momentarily lowering, revealing a warmth she hadn't seen in far too long. The moment stretched, fragile and potent, before the surrounding crowd jostled them apart. Later, they found a slightly quieter spot on a grassy slope overlooking the river, away from the main surge of people. Below them, small boats decorated with lanterns drifted on the dark water. Across the river, the city skyline glittered like scattered jewels. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the lights dance on the water. Daniel was the first to break the quiet, his voice low, hesitant. "Elena, about everything." He stopped, seeming to search for the right words. The CEO who could command boardrooms and navigate complex international deals suddenly seemed at a loss. Elena turned to look at him, her heart giving a nervous thump. "Here it comes. The private reckoning. About Strategist 7? She prompted softly, deciding directness was the only way through the maze he'd constructed. He winced almost imperceptibly at the name. "Yes. And, before that. After that. All of it." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized as pure nervous energy, something he rarely showed. "There's no excuse for the deception, Elena. None. It was cowardly. Controlling. Manipulative." He met her gaze, his own filled with a raw honesty she'd never expected. "I know that. When I saw you at Novatech, after everything, I panicked. I wanted." He trailed off, looking out at the river. "What did you want, Daniel?" She asked quietly, needing to hear it, needing to understand the why behind the elaborate, hurtful game. "I wanted you back," he admitted, the words barely a whisper, yet they landed with the force of a physical blow. "But I'd messed everything up so badly. The breakup, the way I handled it, the way I handled everything back then. I was drowning." He finally looked back at her, his vulnerability startling. "That day you waited, the day you finally suggested we end things. S Group had just pulled their funding. Novatech was hours from collapsing. Hundreds of jobs on the line. My father's legacy, everything was imploding around me. I couldn't think straight, couldn't focus on anything but stopping the bleeding. When your message came through proposing the breakup, it felt like another failure I couldn't prevent. My reply, that single word, it was unforgivable. But it wasn't about you, Elena. Not really. It was about my own colossal failure, my panic." Elena listened, the old hurt warring with a new understanding. She remembered that awful day, waiting for him, the hours stretching into an eternity of silence, the final, crushing weight of his one-word reply confirming her worst fears. Hearing his side now, it didn't excuse the pain, but it reframed it. It wasn't malice, just fear. Overwhelming, paralyzing fear. "You could have told me, Daniel," she said softly, the accusation gentler than she expected. "You could have just told me you were swamped, that something was wrong." "I know," he said, his voice rough. "Pride. Fear. Stupidity. Take your pick. I didn't know how. And then, you were gone. When you walked back into my life at Novatech, so capable, so determined. I wanted to help you succeed. Genuinely. But I also wanted you. And I was terrified of messing it up again. Terrified you'd shut me down." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "So, Strategist 7 was born. A ridiculous, cowardly way to stay close, to guide you, to, I don't know, try and prove I wasn't the idiot who let you walk away." He looked at her, his expression earnest. "The dog? Marshmallow. I kept the name secret because it felt too soft. Too revealing. Another weakness I didn't want you to see." Elena processed his words, the confession tumbling out, raw and unvarnished. The manipulative strategist 7 dissolved, replaced by this man with flawed, stared, surprisingly vulnerable beneath the layers of corporate steel. The anger she'd nursed, the sense of betrayal, began to recede, replaced by a complex ache of empathy and forgiveness. It was manipulative, Daniel, she said honestly. And controlling. It hurt. I know, he repeated quietly, his gaze unwavering. And I am truly, deeply sorry for that hurt, Elena. More than I can say. She looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time since that awful hotel room. Saw the genuine remorse in his eyes, the lingering fear, the hope warring with the expectation of rejection. And she saw her own reflection there too, her own hurt, her own pride, her own undeniable, persistent feelings. I never really stopped, you know, she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Caring. She managed a small, watery smile. Even when I wanted to throttle strategist 7. Even when I knew it was you. A slow, wondering smile spread across Daniel's face, transforming his features, chasing away the shadows. Relief washed over him, so potent it was almost palpable. Me too, he breathed. Never stopped. Just then, the first firework exploded overhead, a shower of gold against the inky sky. Then another, and another, painting the darkness with vibrant streaks of red, blue, and green. The crowd gasped collectively, their faces turned upwards. Daniel's eyes, however, were fixed on hers. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin. The touch was electric, erasing the last vestiges of doubt, igniting a warmth that spread through her entire body. Elena, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. That day, back in Chicago, when I said I regretted it. Regret what? She whispered, her heart pounding in time with the booming fireworks. Regretting that I wasn't tougher, he said, his eyes searching hers. Regretting that I didn't fight harder to stop you from walking away. That I let my fear cost me everything. He leaned closer, the fireworks reflecting in his intense gaze. I don't want to make that mistake again. And then he kissed her. It wasn't tentative or uncertain. It was a kiss full of pent-up longing, apologies unspoken, and the fierce, undeniable relief of finding their way back. It was the culmination of awkward hotel rooms, office politics, secret identities, and near disasters. It was the heat of the Chicago debacle meeting the cool calculation of strategist 7 in forging something new, something real. Elena melted into him, her hands finding their way around his neck, kissing him back with an equal measure of pent-up emotion, the explosions overhead mirroring the turbulent, joyful pounding in her own chest. When they finally drew apart, breathless, foreheads resting against each other, the sky was still ablaze with light. They watched the finale in silence, his arm wrapped securely around her waist, her head resting against his shoulder. The journey had been chaotic, painful, and absurdly complicated. Full of missteps and manipulations, bruised egos, and battered hearts. But somehow, against all odds, they'd navigated the minefield. The truths were out, the misunderstandings cleared, the ghosts of the past finally laid to rest. Looking up at the glittering sky, Elena felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, quiet and deep. It wasn't just a professional second chance she'd found at Novatech. It was something far more precious, far more unexpected. As the last firework faded, leaving shimmering trails against the darkness, Daniel turned her face towards him, his eyes full of promises she was finally ready to believe. This second chance, ignited under a sky full of artificial stars, felt breathtakingly, wonderfully real.